You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. Coming up on today's programme, Boris Johnson says further measures could be taken to help cut energy costs as the government faces calls to suspend green taxes on electricity. Going green or greenwashing, the EU faces criticism over plans to class both natural gas and nuclear power as sustainable fuels. And air quality improves in China's capital, Beijing, but there's a long way to go until the city meets international guidelines on pollution. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show where we track the changes happening to our world right now and challenge those coming up with the solutions. Now, Boris Johnson says he isn't ruling out further measures to help address rising energy costs. The Prime Minister has been urged to tackle rapidly rising energy prices to avoid people having to choose between eating or heating their homes. Some analysis suggests that bills could go up by as much as 50% this year, and several suppliers have said a short-term solution would be to suspend green taxes. Well, let's speak to our business correspondent, Paul Kelso, now. So, Paul, just how much pressure is the government under to cut the green taxes on our energy bills?
Well, it's significant pressure on the entire issue of energy bills because a New Year's present we can all look forward to is a really significant increase in the cost of heating and lighting and powering our homes. Ofgem, the regulator, is currently considering what price it will set the energy price cap at beginning on April the 1st. We'll learn that next month. Most analysts and the energy industry are predicting an at least 50% increase in the lowest price we'll be able to set at pay. And that could raise the average bill to £2,000 for every household, up at least 50%. In total, that will put nearly 2% on inflation in the UK. So it's a huge issue. It affects everyone. And there is pressure on the Prime Minister from two sources to address the so-called green taxes that are on energy bills. They're coming from his backbenches, from those who supported the Brexit campaign in particular, who have some great sway in the Conservative Party at the moment. They would like to see, they have concerns about the whole cost of net zero to consumers. So there's an opportunity they see here to push that agenda. But it's also coming from the energy industry itself, which has never liked the idea that some of the costs of moving to net zero should be added to the bills that they charge their customers. But there is pushback, not least from the Prime Minister's official spokesman today, who played down the prospects of those costs being removed. And sources I'm talking to point out it isn't just the cost of the net zero transition and green issues, green taxes that's in those additional charges. Some of it are the social costs, funding the various measures the government has to help alleviate energy costs to those on low incomes, to the elderly, and so on. So there's pressure there, far bigger pressure around VAT, and perhaps the energy industry would like some loans from government to offset these huge gas price spikes. Whatever they choose, the government doesn't have very long to make a decision. And however much they choose to cut our bills by, if they do take that step, we will all feel the impact of that decision.
Paul, thanks very much indeed. And we'll be discussing this in our Daily Climate Show debate a little bit later in the programme. Today, I'll be joined by economist Vicky Price and climate columnist for The Independent, Donica McCarthy. Now, controversial plans from the European Union have been revealed which would allow natural gas and nuclear power to be labelled as green investments. The proposal could potentially channel billions of euros into the construction of new power plants, but the issue is dividing EU member states. Now, some countries, including France, the Czech Republic and Poland, believe that carbon-free nuclear power is critical to fight global warming and to help towards a green transition. France, for example, gets around 71% of its electricity from nuclear power. But Germany and other countries consider nuclear power to be dangerous. Germany itself decided to close all its nuclear power stations after the Fukushima incident in Japan. The country is on track to phase out nuclear power completely by the end of this year. Reliant on coal for 28% of its power, Germany wants natural gas to be recognised as a less polluting transition fuel, crucial for bringing down emissions. Well, our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons is in Brussels for us this evening. So, Adam, just how controversial are these EU plans proving to be then?
Oh, hugely so, because when you look across the whole of the European Union, everybody has something to say about energy. As you've been hearing, the cost of it is spiralling here in Europe just as much as it is in the United Kingdom. It is, of course, crucial to life, but also the European Union has got this pathway towards net zero by 2050 and is really bridled against this idea of greenwashing. So what it came up with was a horrible word, taxonomy, but really it says categorising energy investments so that investors know what they're doing, so they can go for the most green options. The trouble is, one person's green, it doesn't necessarily tally with another one's. And of course, as you've just laid out there, right at the heart of this is this schism between the two big players in European politics. For the French, who really embrace nuclear power, and the Germans, who are throwing their nuclear stations out of the window. They're going to be all done by the end of this year. To such an extent, they've actually still had to use coal power. They rely a lot on gas. Guess what? They've got a pipeline that called Nord Stream 2, which is just about to open, that comes in from Russia. So you can throw geopolitics into this as well. And this comes down to funding. So the Germans say, look, we should use gas. It's a transitional power towards this net zero. The French say, no, nuclear is better. It hasn't got emissions. The Germans say, no, nuclear is dangerous. It leaves behind radioactive waste. And what we've got then is, on the face of it, something of a fudge, where the European Union has said, OK, we'll give the thumbs up to both gas and to nuclear. The trouble is that hasn't gone down very well at all. Austria has said that it is now considering legal action. Remember, the German government now has the Greens as partners. And while Olaf Scholz, the new Chancellor, is happy with this, the Greens definitely are not. And all this was thrown out on New Year's Eve when no one was really looking. Controversy? Yes, loads of it.
Adam, thanks very much indeed. Let's take a look now at some of the day's other climate news. And investigators in the US are searching for the cause of the Colorado wildfire that destroyed nearly 1,000 homes. The fire broke out unusually late in the year after months of drought that included a dry autumn and a winter with very little snow. Experts say the winter fire was rare, but similar events will become more common due to climate change. And wild weather is wreaking havoc across other parts of the US. In Virginia, hundreds of drivers were trapped in their cars after a snowstorm shut a major highway. A 50-mile stretch of Interstate 95 was blocked after a crash involving 6 tractor-trailers occurred on Monday afternoon. More snow is expected to hit the region later this week. Prince Charles has praised his sons for their work in tackling the climate crisis. In an essay for US magazine Newsweek, Prince Charles said he was proud of Prince William for launching the Earthshot Prize and of Prince Harry for pledging to make his charity Archwell net zero by 2030. The Prince of Wales also used the essay to call on the global fossil fuel industry to take urgent action to address climate change. 4 beekeepers have been detained in Chile following a protest calling on the government to help improve their industry. 7 police officers were stung as they tried to remove beehives placed by the protesters outside the presidential palace in Santiago. Honey production in Chile has been affected by a long-term drought that scientists partially blame on climate change. China's capital, Beijing, met state air quality standards for the first time last year, according to the city's Environmental Protection Bureau. Efforts to reduce pollution, including reducing the use of coal, started in 2014 following a series of hazardous smog build-ups. Our China correspondent Tom Cheshire has the latest from Beijing.
Even in the 4 years I've been in Beijing, the air quality has noticeably improved. There's a lot fewer smoggy days, and it's a world away from what happened in 2014, where you just had blankets of smog over the city. And that led to huge public anger. There was a documentary that got a lot of attention, and authorities launched a campaign to try and clean up the air quality. They took a number of measures. They planted a lot of trees. They introduced emission standards. They tried to switch homes from burning coal in the winter, which is when there was a lot of heavy pollution, to burning gas instead. And all that does seem to have led to a big improvement improvement in the air quality. They also move factories from inside the city to outside it to further bring those pollutions down. Now, there are caveats to all of that. The question of whether Beijing's air has been improved at the expense of other cities, perhaps Inner Mongolia, the province, a lot of those factories moved to, still has very bad air quality, even if Beijing has improved. And second, these sort of standards, the average we're talking about is still nearly 7 times higher than what the WHO, the World Health Organization, recommends as a safe limit. And to take an example, today, pretty good day for pollution, is still 5 times more than what people are experiencing in London. So there is still a lot of work to be done. They certainly haven't reached the goal, but the trend has been a good one. It's made life a lot more bearable for residents of Beijing.
Zookeepers at London Zoo have started this year's stocktake of more than 400 species they care for. Keepers will spend around a week counting every animal from Aria the lioness to Terry the sloth, who are new to the count this year. Conservationists say it's important to know how many of each species are in captivity for potential breeding programmes. We're getting straight to discussing the climate issues of the day now with the economist Vicky Price and the climate columnist at The Independent, Donica McCarthy. So hello to both of you. Happy New Year to you both. So first of all, earlier we heard how the European Commission is proposing that both nuclear and natural or fossil gas should be described as sustainable for finance purposes. Nuclear power is carbon-free but expensive and leaves the huge problem of toxic nuclear waste. Natural gas is a polluting fossil fuel but less so than coal. So, do the EU's plans make sense? Well, to you, first of all, Donica, to Vicky, first of all, the EU says that gas and nuclear are key to the transition to cleaner power, but some are calling it greenwashing. So let's take a look at gas, first of all. Are you happy to see it classified as green?
I am. Well, we can't classify it necessarily as green if we are, looking at the details of how much CO2 is actually emitted by the use of gas. But we can certainly classify it as considerably greener than other fossil fuels. And I think that's the point that is being made. And of course, so many countries right now in Europe depend on gas. And as they are getting out of nuclear, like Germany is doing, then there is really no other option unless you fall back on coal. So gas is certainly a transition one to use over the next few years. And I think it's basically bowing to the inevitability that this type of power generation will have to be used in Europe for some time to come. And just to exclude it from use is just not going to make any sense at all.
Donica, we need a transition fuel. Gas will make a much less of an impact than coal. So can we go green without it?
Well, what they're not proposing is abolishing the use of gas. What they are proposing, what the International Energy Agency says is we cannot afford to build any new fossil fuel plants if we're going to hit net zero 2050. So the idea that the European Union labels using methane-based gas as a green option is farcical. It is greenwashing, and it is unacceptable.
Vicky, should we talk about nuclear as well? Because France, for example, relies on nuclear energy for more than 70% of its electricity. It says the EU can't reach its goal of carbon neutrality by 2050 without it. It doesn't produce CO2, so should it be embraced as a sustainable option?
I think what we need to look at is quite the careful wording that the EU is using, which is on nuclear, is making it very clear that what they are considering is nuclear is acceptable if it doesn't have any serious problem in terms of dealing with waste disposal at the end, and if it is actually built, the new nuclear plants, in a certain way that is also acceptable in terms of climate change. So they have a number of stipulations there. Now, of course, there are loads and loads of old nuclear power stations around. So you could argue that perhaps we can make better use of what we've got now and then get rid of them, perhaps, but in the sense that, mothball them eventually if we get renewable sources that can take over from nuclear. But if you look at what's going on in France right now, for example, given that they're so dependent on nuclear at present, even though they say they want to reduce that and they are expecting to reduce that quite significantly as a percentage of overall energy use, nevertheless, they are going to be dependent on not just the power stations they have now, but new ones as well. And that's the real issue, because quite a lot of the old ones are coming to the end of their useful life. So I'm afraid we are going to have new nuclear as well in the mix, even though there are still serious concerns about whether they are environmentally friendly, if you like.
Donica?
Well, it's clear that they're not environmentally friendly. They've been trying to find a solution to the waste problem, a toxic waste problem, for 70 years without coming up with one. But the other problem in terms of climate change, it's very clear to build a nuclear power station from scratch to it producing any electricity takes 20 years. That would mean that if we started today, to be the mid-2040s, before any nuclear power stations start helping us reduce our carbon emissions, which is 20 years too late. What we need to be doing is concentrating on three things: energy efficiency, investing in renewables, and investing in modern storage technologies. Those are the three investments that Europe should be looking at and which the United Kingdom should be looking at.
OK, let's move on to our next topic, shall we now? Because it might be a choice between heating and eating, we were warned today, as energy bills look set to rocket in the spring. Now, some energy suppliers and Conservative MPs have said that one solution would be to suspend VAT and green taxes, which are currently levied on our bills. So, are they right? And Donica, the figures are quite startling, aren't they? The average household energy bill could rise by £723 per year. That's one estimate. So, should the green taxes go in order to help out consumers?
Yeah, it's quite shocking, and it is going to put a lot of people into fuel poverty. And what we have here is a failure to invest in energy efficiency and renewables for 20 years by the UK government that's left us at the mercy of the fossil fuel markets. It's fossil fuels which are exploding in cost, not by a factor of 9. So what we should be looking at is cutting green taxes would be cutting our investment in cutting bills in the future, cutting our nose to spite our faces. So what we should be looking at is actually if we cut, for example, VAT, that means you're giving a tax subsidy to the middle classes and to the rich. What we should be doing is restoring the universal credit cut that the government did, so poor people have the money to pay the extra costs in fuel that will be exploding over the next few months.
Do you think that's the right solution, Vicky, and that green taxes should be kept?
I think what the government needs to do is intervene pretty fast, because there is indeed a crucial issue as to whether people are going to be able to afford the energy and that they need to consume in their homes, and whether they'll be able to survive, if you like. And this, heating or eating is actually a very important issue for a very large number of people. And even, if you look at the middle classes, which, of course, tend to be a bit more sheltered, actually the increase is going to be pretty substantial. So what you can do, of course, is keep those taxes still there. If you look at the percentage that goes for what we call government environmental and social schemes, it's about 13%, and VAT is about 5%, is 5% actually for household bills. It's slightly higher for, it's 20% for business users, except for those that don't use an awful lot of energy, when it's 5%. So they're not huge. And of course, as prices are going up, they are substantial if you look at the percentages. But overall, what's really happening is that this wholesale price for gas that's going up very significantly has gone up. But the question is, how long will that last? I think there is a short-term issue to medium-term issue that the government needs to meet, which is basically assisting energy companies to keep those increases that have to come at some point down as much as possible, and looking at the price cap as well, the way it goes up in April, so that we don't get those very substantial increases. What we've seen in various other countries is that they have intervened. They have done something about VAT. They have done something about some of those social payments. So actually, I think government needs to intervene very, very significantly to stop
Donica,
that.
I can see you want to come in. Do come in now.
Yeah, the other point is, larger than green taxes is the standing charges. The standing charges of around £200 on a gas electricity bill is a tax on the poor. Why should a poor pensioner living in a small flat, one-room flat by herself, pay the same amount in standing charge as a massive palace for a billionaire? They should be scrapped, and that should be transferred to the bills themselves, so that poor people are not actually hammered by it. So I'm suggesting two things for poor people: restore the universal credit cut, and actually abolish the standing charges, so poor people are not hammered by their energy bills over the coming months.
OK, well, Donica McCarthy and Vicky Pryce, I suspect this is something we will return to in future weeks and months. But for the moment, thanks both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, on tomorrow's show, I'm going to be joined by the Chief Executive of the Climate Group, Helen Clarkson, and climate scientist, Dr. Ella Gilbert. So do join me for that. Meanwhile, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.